Good evening. I'm Zak Tanweer, founder and editor of the Milli Chronicle from the beautiful city of Dammam, Saudi Arabia. And I thank all of you for joining us this evening for this wonderful webinar, Options for Peace and Stability in Middle East. And before we begin, I just wanted to share a word that our condolences and sympathies with all those who were touched by this tragic event that took place in Colorado. I'm sure that you all will join me in showing solidarity with the victims of the attack and stand firm against the extremist ideology. And the second thing is, I'm indeed thankful to Mohammed Abbasi of Association of British Muslims for motivating me and helping me to conduct this seminar. And this would not be possible if our esteemed guests like Mr. Tony Shaffer, Mr. Ahmed Quraishi, Dalia, Ziada, and Khaled, Hamoud, Alshareef would not have accepted our invitation to join this discussion today. And a couple of points before we start this session, that this program will be recorded today and we'll stream it on multiple Facebook pages on Saturday for our audience to watch and get benefited. Further, the panelists will speak for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll open the floor for the discussion. Indeed, our panelists need no introduction, as they are known for their sincere and courageous views, for which we admire them. And however, for those who are listening or watching them for the first time, I would like to introduce them. We have Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Tony Shaffer. He's a senior fellow and president of London Center for London Center for Policy Research, and he served as Defense Intelligence Officer for 28 years. He was also advisory board member of Trump 2020 campaign. Colonel Shaffer has appeared on Fox News, CNN, and other major TV and radio programs, and has been reviewed by the New York Times and other publications on pre-9/11 operations focused on Al-Qaeda. He's the author of Operation Dark Heart and the novel The Last Line. And we have our next esteemed guest, Mr. Ahmed Quraishi. Mr. Ahmed Quraishi, who is a journalist, commentator and author with a presence in the media of the Middle East and Pakistan. He covered the Afghanistan war for Al Jazeera Arabic and was embedded with US military in Iraq. He has hosted foreign policy related television talk shows. He covered events in Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Mr. Quraishi has participated in academic exercises involving Pakistani and American militaries, joined in Sino-Pakistani Academic Exchange in China in 2005, and sat in closed-door academic discussions organized in Kuwait City by US and Gulf institutions on strategies for post-Saddam Iraq. And we have Dalia Ziada from Egypt. She is an author and writer and award-winning blogger. She is the author of The Curious Case of the Three-Legged Wolf, Egypt, Military Islamism, and Liberal Democracy. She currently works as the director of the Liberal Democracy Institute, a think tank advising policymakers in Egypt and the Middle East. And Dalia's story and struggle for the betterment of Egypt is profiled in American best-selling books such as Robin Wright's Rock the Kasbah, Rage and Rebellion Across the Islamic World. And Ziada worked as the executive director of Ibn Khaldun Center for Democratic Studies and regional director for the American Islamic Congress. And currently she leads the Liberal Democracy Institute. And in addition to this, Ziada is a board member of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the National Council for Women in Egypt. And then we have a friend of a brother, Khaled Hamoud Alshareef from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He holds PhD in business and he earned master's in philosophy. He often writes about Islamism, Islamist factions, and modern terrorism. And we have read his research on the evolution of terrorist organizations. Finally, we are honored to have Mohammed Abbasi, Director of Association of British Muslims. He worked as a peace activist and conflict resolution specialist. He's a part of Football for Peace Global, and he advises Sports for Peace organizations internationally. He has met prime ministers and presidents, including British, Pakistani, and Indonesian. Mr. Abbasi also speaks on military strategies such as Chinese art of war, which is used by many military academies around the world. And he also speaks on mind mapping, memory skills, and he coaches on meditation and mindfulness. I welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining this discussion. So now, without any further ado, we would love to hear Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, and I'm sure that our audience will get benefited through his incredible experience and knowledge. Over to you, Mr. Tony.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the great introduction. I consider it a privilege to be here with all of you. I appreciate the foundation of our connection being that of actually trying to find practical paths and practical policies to better the people we work with and represent. I always enjoy including personal experience which relates to the group's understanding. And just today, I had to go to the dentist. We all hate going to the dentist. And the dental assistant immigrated from Pakistan at 10 years old to the United States. She lives here in Springfield, where I'm at. And we had this amazing conversation about Benazir Bhutto, about Ambassador Sherry Rahman, about what is important regarding us being essentially able to live together, to be unique. She still identifies as a former Pakistani, but she recognizes that there is work to be done to de-radicalize those who would kill people. And it was a very, despite my dental issue, a very productive conversation. And I appreciated her being very young, remembering what it was like. She was 10 years old when Benazir Bhutto was assassinated. She still remembers it. And we talked through all of this. And I talked about some of the work we're doing. I mentioned working with you all. And she said, thank you for doing this. This is something very important. So while, look, I'm an old crusty intelligence officer, been in combat, done a lot of interesting things. But what I'm gratified by is the voices across the planet. Here we are, trying to figure out how can we actually defeat radicalization that results in the murder of members of your faith. And this is notable, and Mohammed Abbasi and I have spoken about this a number of times, about how I think many of us, not me, but many of us in the West fail to recognize the largest group, the largest vulnerable group to radical Islam is Islam itself, is that you all who simply want to practice your faith or put forth an idea of how to better each culture you're a member of, you guys are the most available target. So this is where I've tried to work behind the scenes and publicly on this as a friend. I'm not here to do anything except try to be helpful. And that's one of the things I wanted to go through today is the president of the London Center for Policy Research. Many of our efforts are public, many of our efforts are private. So I'm going to kind of go through both today and offer up our support. We are a split-based think tank. We are actually both present in Manhattan. I've worked with the Pakistani mission in Manhattan. One of the projects I was working on recently, I talked to Mohammed about, was trying to help get more credit for Pakistan's actual success in the tribal area, being able to counter extremism. I think it's a good news story that needs to be told. That doesn't get told enough. And so this is something that we do quietly behind the scenes. I work with members of the media to try to get them to go do the reporting. We were very close to a deal to have mainstream, three-letter mainstream reporter from one of the one of the national well-known outlets go to Pakistan to do reporting in the tribal area about Pakistan's suffering and their work to resolve this. And I think this is where more information is necessary for the United States, the public to understand. Now, publicly, I'm working right now with Mohammed on some issues regarding sports outreach. Not well known, it's not a secret. I'm a member of law enforcement in Northern Virginia. I actually am the Homeland Security Advisor to Sheriff Dave Decatur. It's a county, Stafford County, just south of Quantico here in Virginia. So I get to play a role in law enforcement. Got a badge, got a gun, do all that stuff as I need to help out. But one of the great things is Sheriff Decatur has did a great outreach to the Islamic community within Stafford County. And we're trying to find a way to do hands across the water to increase our understanding of issues that all communities face. And then on top of that, a public-private work we've been doing on the Abraham Accords. Again, Mohammed knows this and others do too. I'd worked with Mike Pompeo when Mike was a member of Congress. When he was over at CIA, this is not well known. The first week after Mike was confirmed as director of CIA, he had me come in, and I thought we were going to talk about intelligence stuff. And I sat down on the 7th floor, and I was ready to go into my intelligence spiel. And he said, no. Tell me about this Arab NATO concept that you've been working on with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Tell me about that. I'm getting ready to go to Turkey. I want to start looking at how we can be helpful. And next thing you know, he's Secretary of State working what he did. So that's what we want to do as a think tank. It's not about who we know. It's about who we know that can do something, that can be effective. And so my board measures my success not on how many papers we write, not on how many podcasts we make. It's more about how can we involve ourselves effectively to be a good partner to those who want to do something, to accomplish something. And I know from many of you, from your story, from your histories, from your work, the politics of both extremes, left and right, seem to really detract from our ability to make progress. And I'm using small p progress, not big P progress to find effective policies and establish effective paths forward. So that's why I am indeed honored to be amongst you today, to have this time and ability to speak about this. Saudi Arabia plays a huge role in going forward. Egypt, I've been talking to members of the parliament there. They want us to start outreach again. Mohammed and I have always been in touch. We always are looking for opportunities to do things. Some of you may know I actually spent some time at Warwick University back in 2016, doing some work with them on intelligence and counterterrorism issues. So we're not in this for purposes of building our Rolodex. We're not in this to self-aggrandize. It's not about, it's not about me. It's not about the center. It's about how we can be a good partner and trying to work with you all. So I think that's all I wanted to say today. We do a broad range of outreach. I do a lot of media here in the United States. I do a lot of BBC. I've been on some very colorful interviews on BBC4. Some of you could probably track that down, where the presenter was telling me how I was thinking about things, which was very interesting. It's always good to be told how you think about something when they ask you a question. Also, we have Thought to Action, our own internal podcast we've started. Just had Ambassador Rick Grinnell on recently. For those of you who actually track U.S. media, Kirstie Alley and I are friends. Lieutenant Savak from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. We're going to have her come on and talk about some of her experience being bullied on the internet and some of the things like that. So we do a wide range of things. We are here as a partner. Obviously, one of the issues that always hold us all back is funding. If I could, I would be out meeting with you all, engaging face-to-face and doing a lot more in-person efforts. Obviously, we have to wait till COVID goes away or gets dealt with. But I think in this next 4 years, no matter how you look at the Biden administration, no matter who you believe is right or wrong politically, I think it's incumbent upon us as those who have been working this to try, despite politics, despite preconceived notions, to set aside our differences and try to find a path that will ensure that we can continue to work to de-radicalize terrorist organizations, all flavors, and try to find a way that we can establish better understanding and sustainable peace agreements. So that's all I had to say, and I'm open to any questions that you all may have for me.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. I mean, your information was really amazing, and we are with you, and we are here to support you in all your efforts. Thanks a lot. I think now we can, listen to Mr. Ahmed Quraishi, what he has to say about the possible options for peace and stability in the Middle East from Pakistan's point of view. Over to you, Mr. Quraishi. Would you please unmute?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was not unmuted. So thank you very much, Zach, and really great to be here with this very distinguished panel. Great to listen to Anthony moments ago. That was a great insight. I'm looking forward to listen to the rest of you. I'm just gonna share a few points with all of you, and I hope you know, because all of us, frankly, are involved in public policy issues, and we talk and listen, and there's so much to process, and I think here it'll be much better if we just simply share quick points. And from where I sit in Islamabad in Pakistan, there are 3 or 4 points, very key, very important, that I'd like to share with you. One is that while there is no dearth of historic moments in our region, in the wider Middle East region, but this is by far, I think, the most interesting time. I'm sure all of you agree. And I think this is a decisive moment for many reasons, but one of the key reasons is that we are seeing right now clear realignments with regards to how the Muslim world and how the role of the Muslim countries is supposed to be in the future, in the 21st century and moving forward. And I think that we are right at the cusp of a moment where I think even the role of Islam and how Islam would interact with other civilizations around us and the global civilization, that role is also undergoing a transformation right now. And I have no doubt in my mind when I say that Islam, in a way, was, as a religion, as a civilization, as a culture, was hijacked in the early 20th century by political groups that politicized it, and went ahead with that, and we saw the whole transformation of this religion into political groups and then militant violent groups. And up to the year 1979, when the Sunni and the Shia Islams were hijacked, one by an act that happened in Mecca in Saudi Arabia when extremists seized Mecca in 1979, and that was the beginning of what I would say was the hijacking of the Sunni Islam, and which intensified, of course, after the Soviet invasion the same year, 1979, in Afghanistan. And that's how the Sunni Islam was hijacked. And the same year, we had the hijacking of the Shia Islam in Iran and the weaponization of the Shia sect of Islam by a small group of clerics whom I would not identify as Shia Muslims, but more as Shia jihadists or Shia extremists, and to be more accurate, really, as Khomeinists. Because Khomeinists is really a very new class of political thought within extremist Shia Islam, just as we had Al-Qaeda in Sunni Islam, and then ISIS and Daesh and Takfiris and so forth. So in 1979 was a key moment, and the hijacking of Sunni and Shia Islam, and I would say. And of course, with the establishment, with the creation of the State of Israel, there was this huge civilizational conflict that was begun between Islam and Judaism, and between Muslims and Jews, and it intensified. I mean, it was in a very short time, I think, in less than half a century, peoples from both faiths, and specifically from the Islamic faith, from Islam being a huge religion, more than a billion and a half. This religion, the people of this religion, we forgot how these two religions coexisted for over 13 or 14 centuries. And we had this huge conflict after the establishment of the State of Israel and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I think this is a time, a moment, and this is very important to realize. And I think I find myself focusing a lot on this point, that right now this is a time where we need to redefine this conflict between Muslims and Jews that was twisted by many of the extremist religious groups in both Sunni Islam and also in Shia Islam. And often we underestimate the fact that the relations between Judaism and Islam, very rich, very historic culture. I mean, just recently, I think a few weeks ago, I was talking to a friend from Uzbekistan, and I discovered that one of the most important museums that they have in Uzbekistan has one of the oldest copies of Al-Quran written in Hebrew. It was written by one of the important thinkers and religious scholars of Judaism, who translated the Quran into Hebrew, and the oldest copy is in that museum in Uzbekistan. And of course, you also have the Jewish Museum in Turkey, and there's this whole history of Muslim Jewish coexistence and cooperation, not only in Spain and Northern Africa and Turkey and the Near East, the Middle East, but also inside Palestine. There's a whole history of Arabs and Jews coexisting up until the events of 1947 and 1948, and what transpired after that. So this is a moment where we can redefine this story. And one of the things that I find myself attracted to right now is also the redefinition of the concept or the idea that we, the people in the region, have of Zionism. So, for example, where we, the people of this region, have embraced the national movements of Arab nationalism, the Turkish nationalism of Kemal Mustafa Pasha Ataturk, the Iranian national movement of early 20th century, the Pakistani independence movement, and so forth. Somehow the Zionism as a movement for the national self-determination of the Jewish people somehow got twisted and misunderstood, I would say, and because of all the thing, whatever that happened in Palestine and Israel post 1948. So I think this is a great moment to understand the Jewish national movement also, and accept it just as the Arab national movement was accepted, and the Turkish national movement, the Iranian national movement, the Pakistani national movement. So I think that this is a moment of flux, and also it's a moment of taking sides, because we've seen a model that was created by Sunni religious extremists. That model was defeated it sort of emerged in one way in Afghanistan, but was also defeated in Afghanistan. But then we have a Shia jihadist model that is yet to be defeated, that is very strong, that has the allegiance of possibly millions of people. And then we have a whole state in the shape of a large, rich country, Iran, that supports that ideology of extremism, of conflict in the region, of divisions, of opposition to peace overtures, whether they be in between Arabs and Israelis, or they be in Yemen, for example, or in Afghanistan, even for that matter. And we saw political developments in Turkey, where we saw the reemergence of a political thought and ideology in the past, I would say, couple of decades, where that tried to, again, I would say, hijack Sunni Islam and take it in a new direction. So I think it's a great moment to really make Muslims, first of all, aware of these multiple attempts to hijack Islam, whether it's Sunni Islam or Shia Islam, and to make more and more of our people understand, to have pride in their religion for sure, but at the same time to be wary of attempts to hijack their faith for political agendas in different parts of this very interesting region. So it's interesting times, and I think if we can create enough awareness on these few points, I think we can settle many of the conflicts. I would say, we have a huge cultural war taking place here in the Middle East, just as For example, we've seen recently in the U.S. and we see right now happening in the U.S. For example, frankly, it's all over the world. So we have this huge cultural war in the Middle East. It's more deadly in the Middle East because cultural wars in this region have a tendency to turn into huge, major religious wars and conflicts. So it's interesting times, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, all of you, on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Ahmed Quraishi, I've been following you on Facebook, and I see that you're making incredible efforts, especially in Urdu language, to educate our people to come out of the ignorance and to understand that the conflicts and the fights will not yield anything. I really appreciate, and we in fact really appreciate your efforts. We have some interesting questions to ask you about what you have mentioned about Pakistan and Israel, but I think we'll come to it later once we hear Ms. Dalia Ziada about what she has to say about the possible options for peace and stability in the Middle East from Egypt's point of view. And we know that Egypt has played a huge role during Arab Spring 2011 and how it came back to stability. So we would like to hear to Dalia Ziada. Over to you, ma'am.
So thank you so much. Actually, I will start from where Mr. Quraishi stopped. It's the point of being a Muslim who is usually being accused of being Islamophobic. When you try to fight against the extremists who claim or who speak in the name of Islam and represent themselves as the only people who are like representatives of God on earth. I remember even when Egypt and Arab Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Bahrain started their campaign against the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They were attacked in international media, international news, and even in Western newspapers like the Foreign Policy and reputable newspapers were attacking them and calling them Islamophobic just because they were trying to fight against the extremist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. And the problem here actually, if we look back long before the Arab Spring, how these groups, political Islamists, were able to hijack our religion and represent themselves as the only speakers in the name of this religion. I think the mistake here falls on those who call themselves liberals or seculars, because at one moment, perhaps in the 70s or the 80s, no, in Egypt at least, it was in the 70s and the 60s, people started to feel more modern, to feel more liberal and open. They thought like, we have to drop Islam altogether, or we have to put the religion aside. This gave an excellent opportunity to extremists to abuse Islam and abuse religion to control the grassroots people. And we have seen this actually manifesting in Egypt's case, at least after the Arab Spring, after our revolution in 2011. I remember in this revolution, most of the people who participated were mainly young people. I was one of them. We were young, working for liberal democracy. This was our dream, and this was the goal we were fighting for. And then all of a sudden, only a few months after the revolution, we found out that the only group that was able to make it to power was the Muslim Brotherhood. And that was not like what is usually written in media, that they were the most organized and the most so and so. No, it was simply because they had control over the grassroots people, over the majority of the people who were suffering, from the corruption of the former regime. They did not have access to proper food, to proper health care, and the Muslim Brotherhood were providing this to them. And also they were controlling them by their rhetoric, like, if you follow us, we will bring you to heaven. They even used this as in their electoral campaigns to attract people, like, we are your road to heaven, or we are your path to heaven. So you can imagine how they brainwashed the minds of the people. And even after we successfully got rid of them in 2013, they tried to do the same thing in the West. They tried to brainwash the minds of the West by claiming that they are a political opposition group. They represent the majority Muslim people in the Arab world, which of course is not true. And I think the main reason why we are stumbling on the way to building a democratic state up till this moment is simply because of the Islamist extremists like the Muslim Brotherhood, who were trying, or still actually trying, to hijack our revolution and our hope for democratization. So the first step is to control them. And I think we have to be optimistic about that. Containing or quarantining the Muslim Brotherhood, I think, is already happening right now with all the efforts for reconciliation between important countries in the region right now. We have seen, for example, reconciliation, the Gulf reconciliation that happened in January between Qatar on one side and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt on the other side. It's already in the process now, and I think good steps are being taken towards this. And also we are seeing now the reconciliation that's happening between Turkey and Egypt, which I think it's a process still at the very beginning, but it's very promising. And if successfully implemented, it would definitely put a big pressure on the Muslim Brotherhood and control, or at least cut a big portion of the funding and support that was sent their way from Turkey and Qatar. Also, very interesting move happened in the past months is our rapprochement with Pakistan. After long years of cold relationships, we had the foreign minister of Pakistan visiting Cairo, and then last week we had an agreement between the two defense industries in Pakistan and Egypt to work together on developing new weapons and working more on military issues. All these things tell that countries are, I think the states, even more than the people, are now realizing that they should not give much space or another opportunity for political Islamists or extremists to take a space bigger than what they deserve. Speaking about Israel, even look now what's happening between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. A lot of initiatives, even on popular level, for approaching each other, for understanding each other, and breaking decades of misconceptions. This is a very important step that will also mute one of the very important reasons Islamists used to use to gain legitimacy, like, fighting against the Jews, or fighting for Islam against, or fighting for the region, and so on. So this will definitely help in controlling Islamists. So basically, these are like the main points I wanted to speak on, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you so much. I think now we should listen to Khaled, Hamoud, Alshareef. When we talk about peace in Middle East, two names come to our mind. The first one is Saudi Arabia, and the second one is Israel. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone right now to speak the Israeli narrative, but we indeed have our esteemed friend, Mr. Khaled Hamoud Alshareef from Riyadh, to tell us how Saudi Arabia can help establish peace and stability in the Middle East. Over to you, Mr. Khaled.
Thank you for one and all for being here. It's such an honor and privilege to be among all of you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So if we want to talk about peace in the Middle East, fortunately, the first part is the fortunate part, where we had the Abrahamic Accords, and we had peace between, alhamdulillah, Bahrain and the UAE, which is great steps to join in with Jordan and Egypt, giving more space for Israel to, bring in their story and bringing more options for peace. More countries are joining the fray, as I understand. Oman is in the pipeline. I understand almost there's some news about Pakistan. Morocco already joined. So this is great. What we want in the region is peace. And let's be honest, the people in Israel are there, and there's no point of keeping a conflict alive for all these decades. It's just pointless. So we need to live together. The same thing would hopefully in the near future apply to Iran, and gladly now I see there's some positive steps from Turkey towards Egypt that eventually will lead up to hopefully positive steps toward Saudi Arabia and the UAE to bring back that relation to an acceptable level where people can interact with each other with no animosities, because the Middle East have been, we're really fatigued from all this conflict. We're from all these decades. Ironically, like 2 days ago was the 93rd anniversary for finding the Muslim Brotherhood. And I was extensively writing about this and republishing a lot of my work on it. And I got invited into a room of Saudis, and I was really glad and honored to be there because I saw liberal Saudis, conservative Saudis, and Saudis in the center, and they were speaking the same mindset. They're all rejection, the whole absolute rejection of, you know, the Islamist political Islam ideology. Finally, we're at a stage in Saudi Arabia where we see the majority of the people coming together in from the left to the right. Ironically, this is not the situation in most of the countries around the world, but we're the lucky ones, I would say. So I was part of that room, and we were having discussions about, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood and the members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Saudi Arabia who's jailed, especially the key members like Sulaiman al-Awda, Awad al-Qahtani, and others who were, you know, prominently urging people in 2003 to go and bomb people, mainly American soldiers in Iraq. And the irony is those people are now being defended, and we're being called Islamophobes by some people in the left, including the Arabs who lives in the West and the Muslims who lives in the West. Maybe some of them have the Islamist ideology, maybe some have the influences of the Ba'athist Arab pan-Arabism. But end of the day, this is a region that's really fatigued from all this conflict, and the belief in the majority of Saudis, especially people, you know, from age 35 and below, much younger than me, who's really looking for a conflict-free future. Myself, I'm honored to call Pierre Rehov, the Israeli director and author, a friend and a brother. And he's one of my best friends. And hopefully one day he can visit Saudi Arabia, and hopefully one day I can visit him in Jerusalem. So it's honestly, for me and for the majority of the people, it's time to move on. But on the official level, it's a little bit more difficult. And let's be honest, Saudi Arabia cannot take that step unless there is a unanimous agreement from the majority of the Arab and Muslim countries because of us having the two holy mosques and our position in the Islamic world. Hopefully the presentation of the peace agreements that's been offered on the table would hopefully move the peace process into the right direction, whether with the Arab Initiative or any potential other initiatives. Unfortunately, the time for President Trump was cut short, where we were moving in the right direction, but hopefully this administration would move in the right way and keep working on the Abrahamic Accords and more countries, with the support of the United States, would join into the Abrahamic Accords, and hopefully in our lifetime we would see peace in the Middle East.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khaled. All we can say to your words is inshallah. We hope that one day we soon see these things happening. And thanks a lot for exposing the extremist factions. And we say that keep doing your wonderful work by publishing this stuff against the extremist groups. And finally, we have Mr. Mohammed Abbasi. Mr. Mohammed Abbasi, who took part in various peace and conflict resolution activities. I believe his experience will surely will be helpful in understanding what Muslims and Middle East need right now. Over to you, Mr. Abbasi. Would you please unmute yourself?
There you go. I was speaking to myself. Thank you, Zach, for putting everything together. I really appreciate you organizing this. And the whole idea of connecting with each other, outreach, honest conversations, is something that not just Muslims, I think all of us should be doing. There is really, for a person who follows faith, not just Islam, there is no us and them. There's no me and you, or we're all the creation of Allah, of God, of Brahma, of our Creator. Our differences are not a hindrance between us. There are ideas, perceptions, different perceptions which we can learn from one another. Where Islamists, evangelicals, Hindutva, or fanatics of different religions, where they use the religious identities to create differences, that is the issue. So Ahmed, for example, was speaking about the Sunni Shia. The Sunnis and Shias were together until 1979. If you look at, I think 1974 or 1975, the Shah of Iran, Shah Reza Pahlavi, he visited Saudi Arabia, and there's a YouTube online that saw King Salman now, but he was one of the princes there. Along with other princes, they were actually holding the sword dance to greet the Shah of Iran. So the Shah of Iran, the Sunnis and Shias were together. There's no differences between our different groups, apart from certain aspects of theology and certain ideas, but we're Muslims. So the thing is, when you look at 1979 and what came after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, took place in 79, I believe, and how Pakistan became a frontline state and subdued its national interests to that of the US. I'm not attacking our brother, our friend Tony here, but there's a lot of ideas, a lot of things that kind of came into play, not just for Pakistan, but other countries within the region, Muslims and others. And they were used also by political Islamists who allied themselves first with the West. Then when that kind of finished in the 1990s, there were so many other different groups that got set up. This is when also where the definition of Islamophobia, or the word Islamophobia, came about. Islamophobia means Islam and phobia. So it's Islam and the fear of Islam. People have the right to fear a religion, not just Islam. So there's no such thing as Islamophobia hurts me. Okay? Anti-Muslim hatred hurts me as a Muslim. There's no such thing as Islamophobia. Now, allegations of Islamophobia, people who use allegations of Islamophobia and hide behind Islam to perpetuate their kind of political beliefs or extremism, do so they basically use Islam as a tool to protect themselves from being questioned. Okay, so say, for example, someone might say or do something against a different group, maybe the Christians or the Jews or people within, our Muslim traditions, maybe another Muslim group. So if they are called out and questioned on that, they try to hide behind the definition of Islamophobia. You're being Islamophobic. No, people are not being Islamophobic. People are questioning you. And no religion should be given special protection against criticism. Neither Sikh religion, Christian religion, Hindu religion, whatever. We're all in this together. Okay, the proliferation of phobias is not desirable. Okay, it's as Muslims, we need to kind of come out and stand up for ourselves as Muslims in a much better and much more stronger and confident way. Okay, anti-Muslim hatred needs to be challenged, like hatred of any group or individuals. Extremists should not be able to hide behind Islam and shout Islamophobia when called out for their extremism. Now, where Saudi Arabia is concerned, Saudi Arabia has always been looked up to as a leader of the Muslim world and remains one of the strongest Muslim and Arab nations. The Arab Spring, which was supported, aided and abetted by a couple of the Islamist groups that you guys have mentioned here, such as the Muslim Brotherhood and also Jamaat-e-Islami and elements from the West, especially the Democrats, and I would probably would say that Hillary Clinton and some of the people around her were very much kind of responsible to what happened in different countries in the Middle East and what's happening in Syria now. As Muslims, we need to kind of understand that we have a responsibility for our religion, for the teachings of our Prophet, to be able to express them in the best way possible and not use them, not allow them to be used negatively against other people. My understanding of what's happening now, for example, where Saudi Arabia is concerned, is that the Crown Prince, MBS Mohammed bin Salman, is looked on as a threat, not just by Islamists, but also by people within certain Western circles, including Islamist groups in the West. What they see is someone who's about 35, 36, 37. When he becomes king, he will probably stay there as king for about 30, 40 years. And MBS, a new generation of Saudis who are committed to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabian national interests, and not committed to interests of other countries. They can see, and they grew up in a kind of an international culture where they can see what was happening around them, and they can see who their enemies are, who their friends are. Saudi Arabians are becoming more confident, and we need to find a way of making sure that Saudi Arabian voices, you're doing a fantastic job, Zach, online and in other areas, as is Khaled. The Saudi Arabian voices need to be heard much more stronger, that you guys are with Saudi Arabia, you care and respect and love your country, but at the same time, you're a new generation and you're not afraid of questioning people, not just within Saudi Arabia, outside Saudi Arabia, who attack Saudi Arabian national interests. So as a Muslim from Pakistani background who's here in the UK, I've seen the kind of rise of extremism here in the UK among some circles within our Muslim community. These issues are being tackled a lot more by British Muslims and other people here. But what I see that in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabians are kind of standing up a lot more stronger for their own country, but they also need to now show the way of, for other nations such as Pakistan and other countries, how we can all work together to tackle extremism and promote peace. So Zach, that's my 2 words.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. We have received some questions, so I think I need to ask these questions to the panelists. The first question is to Colonel Shaffer. This is in context to what just Mohammed Abbasi mentioned about MBS, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, getting attacked every now and then. So the question is regarding the Khashoggi issue, which was recently, came into light. Saudi Arabia accepted the problem and they held the criminals responsible. And in fact, Khashoggi's son, Salah Khashoggi, he thanked Saudi leadership for that. Despite that, some people in the Biden administration are still witch hunting MBS, while thousands of journalists in other countries are missing and Iran is killing a lot of people. So the question here is, what is the main problem with Saudi Arabia? I mean, what is the bone of contention? Why MBS is in the line of fire?
Excellent question. And I'll give you what I believe to be the correct answer and the political answer. So let's start with the political answer. The answer the Biden administration would give you if they were asked this question is, oh, well, the Trump administration did not hold Saudi Arabia accountable and they were trying to facilitate bad habits. I would argue the opposite. The actual answer is, I think President Trump, and keep in mind, I was not directly involved, but I did monitor this from the policy perspective. I think the Trump administration did the right thing. They put pressure on Saudi Arabia to do the right thing. It's not our job to police Saudi Arabia. Our job is to try to facilitate doing the right thing. So I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing from the Biden administration is trying to gain political leverage for their own reasons, nothing more. And this is where I believe it's in our interest as a group. We are here today speaking, and others who will listen to our words, to try to make sure that we stay out of the politics of some of this blatant politics that I think is what's happening here. So do I believe that the Trump administration did everything it could regarding the Khashoggi issue? No. Do I believe the Saudi Arabian government has done everything they can? No. But I think it's moving in the right direction, and it's not America's job to tell the Saudis how to handle their own issues. It's tragic. I would never endorse what happened within the Saudi government regarding Khashoggi. With that said, I think it's being politicized by the Biden administration for the wrong reasons. I hope that's an adequate answer.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. We have received another question for Mr. Ahmed Quraishi. Mr. Ahmed, you just mentioned about peace with Israel. So this is something related to that. 3 months ago, you say that Pakistan and Israel are on the cusp of making their decades-old secret ties public, right? By going at the official level. But Pakistan government denied those claims. And we have seen that over 4 Muslim countries made peace deal with Israel after forgetting, the past and focusing on the future. So why did Pakistan position itself as the biggest opponent of the Abraham Accords in 2020? And is Pakistani policy on Israel similar to what Iran has?
Right, that's a very interesting point, Zahak. And let me just answer it this way. Pakistan has a quarter century of indirect relations with Israel. Almost all of the key close allies of Pakistan in the region have very strong diplomatic and military relations with Israel. And the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, China. And I have no doubt that Pakistani military, and even recently with the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, Azerbaijan and Armenia, I have no doubt, and even before that conflict, I have no doubt that Pakistani military advisors in Baku, for example, in Azerbaijan, might have sat on the same table during lunch break or dinner with possibly Israeli military advisors. As you know, they played a key role in the last conflict, Nagorno-Karabakh. there was a lot of Azeri, Azerbaijani, and Israeli military cooperation. So the point is, Pakistan has a 25 years of really very, I would say very, from my information, as a journalist covering national security, 25 years of communicating between these two countries. And in the year 2005, which is like 16 years ago, the president of Pakistan, who was also the army chief, launched a Jewish-Muslim dialogue. Rather, he didn't launch it, but he called for launching a Jewish-Muslim dialogue while addressing leaders of American Jewish organizations in New York City in the year 2005, becoming the first Pakistani president really to address pro-Israel American Jewish groups. So the point is, this relationship exists in the background. Why it did not come out when the time was right in the past 3 months, when Bahrain, when UAE, when Sudan, when Morocco went for it. And this is an interesting point, but I would not give too much importance to it. I would say that this was the the reason would be or have to do with the politics of the current coalition government in Islamabad not being strong enough to take a decisive action on a diplomatic opportunity, a historic opportunity that would have been beneficial for Pakistan and for the region itself. So I think it was more to do with the weakness of the ruling coalition in Pakistan, in Islamabad, the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan, and you've seen recently how weak it is. The Prime Minister had to go through a vote of confidence in the parliament. He succeeded. He still has his job, but he was about to lose it. So this shows you the government was very weak. They couldn't take a historic decision of that magnitude. That would really need a very strong leader to take that kind of decision, the way President Musharraf did back in 2005 when he addressed the pro-Israel groups in New York, and also sent his foreign minister to meet for the first time with the Israeli foreign minister in Ankara in a meeting that was brokered by, surprisingly, by then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And he was the one who actually brokered that meeting for the first time between Israel and Pakistan. So it didn't happen, but it will happen. I have no doubt about that. But meanwhile, I have no doubt that there are communications which are natural. These two countries are nuclear armed nations. There was a point back in 1998, quarter of a century ago, where there was a huge misunderstanding was about to happen when Pakistan and India tested nuclear devices in the summer of '98. And I think Israel's name came in between somewhere, and there was a lot of tension in one night that was resolved by President Clinton establishing direct link between Pakistan and Israel, which continues to this day.
Okay, I have another question for you. You being a Pakistani, coming from a country where people have the habit of calling anyone as Yahudi agent, what's your position on Zionism?
Yeah, this is a very interesting point. I mean, Pakistan is just as Dalia was explaining very interestingly. I mean, we have groups that have brainwashed the public opinion for so long that the word Jewish really is equal to traitor, to somebody who's involved in a conspiracy to destroy you, and then that's the Jewish conspiracy. So it's a brainwashing that happened over decades, and it all links to that whole theory of hijacking the religion and the way you see the world. It's a long discussion, but the point is I see Zionism and I think we need to promote this. See, Zionism is a right of self-determination for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people have the right to have their homeland, just as our brothers, the Palestinian people, have absolutely the right to decide their future, and they have their national movement and deserve a state, a Palestinian state. The same way, I think we need to view Zionism not as a conspiracy against this region, not as the claws of Western or European imperialism in our region. No, we need to see we need to redefine Zionism here in this region as the right of a people, the Jewish people, to have a homeland, and they worked for that, and good for them that they did. But we need to understand it in order to understand also how we then can help both the Israelis and the Palestinians to resolve their conflict.
Thank you so much. We have a question for Dalia. This is in context of Libya. But the question is about the Turkey and Egypt. I think today they confirmed that they had their first diplomatic contact, and Turkish foreign minister was quoted as saying that contacts at the diplomatic level have started. So we see Erdogan has also instructed the Turkish TV shows not to speak against Egypt and Sisi. So you think that these things are moving in a good direction, in the right direction, especially for Libya?
Yes, thank you, Zahak, for the question. I think, yes, of course, any rapprochement between Turkey and Egypt will be a great step, a great thing for the whole region. Not only in the fight against Islamic extremism, which unfortunately used to be supported for so long by Turkey, against the new regime in Egypt, which stood strong against this extremism, and other Arab countries in the region too, who stood strong against the expansion of extremism in the region. Not only in this regard, but also it will be beneficial for many conflicts that are now open in the region. And the first of these conflicts is the conflict in Libya. I'm sure you've been following over the past year what happened when Erdogan tried to abuse the crisis in Libya and the civil war in Libya to serve his own goals in the Mediterranean, to have leverage over in his negotiations with Greece over the disputed areas in the Mediterranean. And he even tried to abuse the Libya case to pressure other Arab countries like the United Arab Emirates and Egypt in particular. And we have seen like threats going on from here and there. It was crazy. Until actually this December, when the tension was escalated to its highest, and actually there was a serious threat that the militias in Libya, I mean those divided between the west and the eastern territories of Libya, as you know, the ones in the eastern territories are supported by Turkey. The ones in western I got confused. Okay, the ones on the west are supported by Turkey. The ones in the east, closer to Egypt, are supported by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. So there was going to be a conflict which was going to be bigger than the size of Libya or the immediate conflict between the divided people in Libya. It was going to be a regional conflict. But thank God, at the right time, the reconciliation is happening, and the pressure for reconciliation now actually is more a popular pressure from both sides in Turkey and Egypt and other people all over the region, that forces the states to sit together and find a way to solve their own problems. What we're hearing right now is that the reconciliation process has already started 2 weeks ago. And there is a period of 3 months until June, during which Turkey should prove its good intentions and prove that it's not going to continue to support Islamic extremism or political Islamist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. And we have seen this already being translated into trying to tone down the TV stations owned by the Muslim Brotherhood in Istanbul that are attacking the Egyptian state all the time. So hopefully this continues. I'm optimistic about this reconciliation, and I think it will serve the good for the whole region. And if you allow me, I have a very quick comment on what was recently mentioned about the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I want to add that he is actually targeted by the West, not only because he is young and he's going to stay for so long, but what he has done since he arrived in power is that he really made some kind of a social revolution. He changed Saudi Arabia in a very positive way, allowed bigger space for youth to express themselves, allowed bigger space even for women and women's rights. And I believe this was something perhaps shocking for those on the West who were keeping a taboo, or no, not taboo, I mean keeping a certain stereotype about how the Saudi Arabians are living their lives. And I remember Khaled was once sharing an image about aliens, and he said everyone in the West thinks the Saudis are aliens. So yeah, so breaking this image or these stereotypes perhaps was not easy to digest by the West, so they decided to fight back in their own way. So
okay, thank you so much. We have a question in context to what Dalia said. To Khaled, Mr. Khaled, the reforms which are taking place under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a lot of Saudis and non-Saudis see that as a magnificent change to break a stereotype, which is often, propagated by the Islamist media, that Saudi Arabia is losing Islam. So the question to you is, do you think that you're losing Islam and trying to appease the West?
I would ask him that question. What do they even mean by losing Islam? The irony is the influence that Islamists and the Sahwa, the awakening, had since the 80s with the time of the Afghan war and with the Russians, and their influence that have been peaking up till the 90s until we had the brewing conflict with Al-Qaeda. Those people were, just literally suffocating the people. So if we're losing that kind of Islam, thank goodness. I just want to remark on what Dalia was just saying about the reforms, but from another corner, and Zach, you're very familiar with it. This kind of reform and the kind of openness, and with the arrival of Trump, by the way, I'm a liberal person. I did not like Trump when he was running, but when he was in office, that was quite the turnaround for me. So I got to know a lot of people on the right and center from the States, and I was honestly shocked and humbled that they were more understanding and more respectful of Saudis and Islam, more than the people on the left who I've spent the majority of my life being with and being part of that kind of mindset. So thank goodness for those odd coincidences, but life gives us lemons, and that kind of lemon juice we've got was a win for all of us, with all those weird situations with Trump coming into office, the openness, and the whole lashback against the Islamists and pushing them out of the spheres of life and spheres of influence in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, thank you. We have a question for Colonel Shaffer, that you made a point that the hardliners from right and the left are both hampering the peace process. So what do you think? I mean, how can we overcome this? I mean, what are the practical steps we need to take to overcome these things?
As it was just said, be open. I think so many of us have preconceived notions about the right or left, and as just stipulated, people became surprised that some of the folks Trump brought in were actually like, oh, we really do want to solve things. So I think those who really do want to push away from any loyalty to extremes and wants to have a dialogue should be accepted to work the dialogue. One of the things I'm impressed with this entire group, and I'm very much humbled to be part of this group for this discussion, is the complete fearlessness in speaking what I think is the objective truth, just saying the truth. And I think that's the key. is that the political sides, both sides, will try to shape and manipulate messaging to benefit that side. The truth is the truth. And if you're in a position where you see the truth being diminished or ignored, then that's wrong. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. So there's some great points. I encourage Saudi Arabians here. We've talked about Saudi Arabians need to stand up for themselves to defend themselves and some of the things going on. And I think that's very important. That's the truth. The idea here that people want to coexist and find a path forward to stop the old conflicts, that's the truth. Now, a lot of the old political parties will not benefit from that. They don't benefit from resolution. They benefit from continued drama. And I think that's the thing I've observed here in the United States. I consider myself conservative, but my conservatism is based on I want to solve things. I don't want to continue to generate process just to show something's going on. Let's get to the bottom of this. And so you all have said the same thing. There's a lot of political things that have happened in the past that set both the Sunni and Shia off on different trajectories, but both incorporated violence. So this is where I find that this group is very important. I know that one of the things I believe was important to this dialogue actually happened back in January of 2015, the 1st of January, when President Al-Sisi went to the, I think it was the, I'm terrible on names, the Al-Azhar Mosque, and talked about the need to reform Islam, to remove, to purge the religion of extremism and intolerance and violence. So this is where I think we could all agree upon the idea that any political party, either side, that does not seek to actually engage in a productive way, to kind of work as part of a team to remove violence, to remove extremism from the dialogue, then that's the key. It doesn't matter what political label you've had in the past or what party you belong to, as long as you're committed to the truth and going forward. So I hope that helps clarify what I was trying to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it really helps us, and we wish that we will definitely try to do what you say. We have a question for Ahmed Quraishi. This is an interesting question. There was a news that Pakistani government was under pressure from the Gulf nations to recognize Israel, and based on this, a lot of Pakistani YouTubers made money. So what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those ridiculous stories that was deliberately planted. There's no question about it. The funniest part of it was that, unfortunately, and it's an unfortunate thing, that Prime Minister Imran Khan, during one of his interviews on TV, very quickly mentioned that I'm under tremendous pressure, for my government to establish diplomatic ties with Israel. And he just mentioned it and moved on. And I think a day or two later, his very own Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied formally that there's any pressure and there's no truth to these stories. So it's true because, from my understanding, from my coverage in Islamabad and also in Gulf states, relations between countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Egypt are not relations based on coercion and pressure. These are relations based on have been built over decades, very strong strategic ties built on mutual understanding. I'm sure there have been consultations, but I just cannot imagine that there would have been pressure per se. Nobody could apply that kind of pressure on anyone in these kind of situations. This is just simply not possible, especially when allies are concerned. So I think it was a ridiculous thing, and I think there was a lobby in Pakistan that was trying to create deliberate misunderstandings I noticed that. I noticed in the Pakistani social media, and we have all these information influence operations, and I noticed all of a sudden these posts popping up with these posters and memes ridiculing countries, specific countries such as Egypt, because it established ties with Israel, or was one of the first Arab countries to do so, the very first Arab country. And also, of course, after that, Bahrain and specifically the UAE. And also, of course, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And I just would like to say one thing here. I think it's very important for like-minded people here across our region, really, to support the Saudi experiment, and especially what Mohammed bin Salman has done, because this is historic. This is historic. I mean, anyone who's a Muslim knows that what Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, has done is generational, is impossible. You would have needed, nerves of steel to take the decisions that he has taken. Being a Muslim leader in a Muslim country in this kind of a region, very risky, very, very risky. I think what the Saudi Crown Prince has done is no less significant than what at one point other modernizers who came in the Arab and the Muslim world did. And there are many leaders in different Arab countries and different Muslim countries who came and who tried to modernize their nations. And people misinterpreted that as going against the religion and tried to like twist it and present it in a different way. So I think like-minded people need to, number one, support the Saudi experiment. And as Anthony just said, more Saudis really need to come up and tell their story. We need to hear more people like Khaled, more and more people who come out and tell their side of the story. I know there are amazing young men and women from Saudi Arabia who were sent on scholarships all over the world, universities, to study and come back by the Saudi government. And they return to Saudi Arabia with new knowledge, new insights. And these are the people who are driving now the Saudi economy, the Saudi openness. And I think these people need to speak up. That's number one. And very quickly, I think we need to also get on board, bring on board some of the Shia Muslims in this region, from Iran, from Iraq, from Lebanon, from Saudi Arabia. And I know some very amazing people in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, Shia Muslims who are opposed to Khomeiniism, who are opposed to, just as we have Muslims who are opposed to extremism in Sunni Islam, we need to bring on board Shia Muslims who are opposed to Shia jihadism and extremism, which has a name, and it's Khomeiniism. It's an ideology. It started at a certain year in 1979. I think we need to bring those people on board as well. I feel often when I sit in various forums, I feel that there's something missing. We're missing those people. We need to have them also on board.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. But let me tell you one thing, that in fact, we decided to get them for this discussion. And in fact, I spoke to some of the Shia Muslims of Iran, but unfortunately, they were busy with the Nowruz holidays. And they said that they couldn't join, but I'm sure that in the next discussion, we'll definitely have a very interesting question for Ahmed, Mr. Ahmed, especially related to what's happening between India and Pakistan. Bajwa, General Bajwa, he recently said that bury the past, and Modi also tweeted in favor of Imran Khan, and Modi congratulated Pakistan on National Day. And we read that Indian Army will do, joint exercise in Khyber in future. So since India and Pakistan are both strong allies of Middle East, do you think that this change in attitude between the two countries bringing more strength to Middle East?
Yeah, just very quickly, I know it's a boring subject and people get, tired very quickly when the issue of Pakistan and India comes. It's just one of those stories that never go away. So it's a boring thing. Just very quickly, there's no question it's a very old dispute, but people forget that Pakistanis and Indians, despite all the wars they went through over the past 7 decades, these two countries actually never stopped exchanging, doing business with each other. And also, doing cultural exchange with each other. Never stop. So many of the Pakistani cultural products, TV dramas, movies were hit in India, vice versa, the Indian Bollywood industry and so forth in Pakistan. So these two peoples and countries have always, mingled with each other. And I think it's a good thing that we're coming back to that. And I think it's going to work out. It can work out. It's very easy to really fall back and go back to that state of conflict. But I think things are changing in this region. Let's hope that good people, and there are many, many countries in this region that are good friends of both India and Pakistan, and maybe they can, help these two countries work the conflict out. And I think the only conflict that Pakistanis and Indians have between these two countries is just this major dispute in Kashmir. And I think the Kashmiri people also deserve peace. They deserve to live in peace and build their future. And I think if something can happen, can be worked out, all these three peoples, the Kashmiris, India and Pakistan, can live in peace. Let's hope it works out. There's a huge, tremendous hope. A lot of people are not happy as well, of course, in India. A lot of people are also not happy in Pakistan about these stories, but it happens everywhere. Let's hope it works out this time.
Let's hope for that. Mr. Khaled, do you have any point to make?
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about the Sunni Shia issue. In regard, many people would think that the majority of Saudis and the majority of Iranians as citizens would have what I would call some animosity. Ironically, it's the other way around, which may be a surprise to a lot of people. So I have a lot of Iranian friends who's inside Iran or outside Iran, who's like-minded, who's opposing to the regime. Some of them even doesn't want that regime moved but reformed. And I don't think we need more regime changes in the region, but what we need is a reform to the approach of the Iranian regime itself. I don't think it's the time or even the correct move to depose a regime, throw a country into chaos. So in like-minded conversation with those wonderful people, some of them hope for reform in their country. I am also hoping to see that reform in Iran and in their ways in abandoning the Khomeinist extreme ways and just trying to work with their neighbors in Saudi Arabia, where we have been neighbors for millennia. And I don't think it's normal or accepted to keep, doing this silly conflict driven by this extremist mindset of exporting revolution. I hope and pray that sometime soon, and also with, I believe, a good and a big role that hopefully would be coming from countries like Pakistan and countries neighboring to Iran, who can, hopefully influence it into adapting a more moderate and a smarter approach towards its neighbors. That's all I just wanted to say.
Thank you. Well, I think we really had an amazing time together discussing a lot of things about Middle East and how we can bring back peace and stability in the Middle East. Before we end this discussion, I would request all the guests and the panelists to please make some closing remarks. Starting with Mr. Tony, please.
Again, thank you for having me today and being part of this effort. I respect and appreciate the courage of everyone who spoke today, of those who are listening. And I think it's important to set aside preconceived notions and ideas which have never served us. One of the great things about the Abraham Accord is that people broke away from the old stereotypes. They simply decided this past method is not working. Let's try something different. And I think that's the key. We are here because we recognize the need to do something, to not be tied to old narratives, not be tied to hate that has only resulted in death. And so, again, I'm not here to preach. I'm simply here to state that we, I think, as a group, have great potential. The United States has played a role, no doubt, in both the chaos and the progress. Nothing is completely 100% one or the other. I think the United States has had far too many neocons, I'll be right up front about that, who have wanted to use violence and American power without understanding the secondary adverse effects of that power. So I think it's our job to better understand how we can work as a partner, not to project our beliefs. And so that's what I would like to try to continue to do on my side, to make sure that we work to prevent imperialism and anything that comes up. At the same time, I want to be helpful. I want to be to work with you all to allow your nations and your interests to be examined, to be explored and discussed. The idea that you would all be considered Islamophobic is insane to me. It goes beyond the pale, simply because you're saying I'm critical of those in my belief structure. You become the bad guy simply because you ask questions. That's not acceptable. So I admire your courage and I appreciate the dialogue. So I look forward to working with all of you on the Saudi issues, on the Pakistani issues, on the Egyptian issues, and via UK. If we can add to our dialogue the Israelis, that'll be great. But I think we all, the center theme really is focusing on objective truth and trying to achieve real and lasting peace. So again, thank you for letting me be part of our discussions tonight.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. We are honored. Mr. Ahmed.
Really have nothing to add except I'll just refer to something Dalia said in the beginning, where she mentioned this renewal in the relationship between Egypt and Pakistan. And we see all these realignments. And I think I don't want to use the term a coalition of the willing, mainly because it was the whole expression was just condemned, by the neocons, during the after 9/11. But really, a coalition of the willing, of like-minded countries that could introduce moderation in this region, peace, and bring an end to conflicts, Yemen, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and mainly the conflict that surrounds Iran and Iran's role in the region, and the nuclear program and the missile program. And so a coalition of the willing. And I think we as individuals, I think we can certainly influence the public opinion in that direction. And I think it's important. It's time that we took responsibility for this region, and it's really very important to do this. And that's why I'm really very grateful for this kind of a forum. And thank you, Zahak, for organizing this.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And hats off to your efforts which you're making on Facebook, especially calling people towards logic and, rational thinking. We really appreciate your efforts. Mr. Khaled.
My advice as someone, Zach, who's brutally honest sometimes, is for people, tone down the sensitivity and let's be honest with each other. In our pursuit of truth, we have, to undermine the offensive language and the offensive opinions. To move forward, we need, to compromise on our emotion and focus on the future. I pray that in our lifetimes we would see an everlasting peace in the Middle East, where everybody from Israel to Iran to Turkey would have normal relations with everyone in their neighbors, in their neighborhood. Let's hope and pray that day would come in our lifetime.
Inshallah. Dalia, your turn now.
Yeah, so actually, I would like to thank you, Zahak, for organizing this and for everyone, because I enjoyed the discussion very much. And I would like to conclude with a positive note that I believe the region is already moving towards a positive change. And we have a very important tool in our hands, which is social media, which we can use to break taboos and stereotypes and accelerate the process of change towards the directions that we want.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Mohammed Abbasi, my brother, you want to say something? Unmute yourself.
I said there's some good friends of mine here who are fans of Star Trek, and the quote from Star Trek where Spock says, "Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one." And where we are concerned, we are the many. We are each other. We need to now look at a way forward for the region, for our countries, for our people, and not be concerned by a few extremists within our midst who have got loud voices. What you're doing, Zach, is very good. I think we need to support you and build more such discussions. And, you know, with Khaled, Dalia, Ahmed, Anthony, all of us, we need to multiply this. And the more we make our voices heard, the more we will drown out those few loud voices. Well done, and I'm looking forward to the next discussion.
Thank you, thank you. And thanks a lot to all our guests, Mr. Tony, Mr. Ahmed, Dalia, Mr. Abbasi, and Mr. Khaled. Thanks a lot for sharing the amazing information and knowledge with all of us. I'm sure that our audience would have enjoyed this superb discussion, and I believe that we all will understand and will be, you know, a part of a movement to bring peace and stability across the world, not only Middle East, inshallah. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.